The revelation of large language models is that they've hacked the human interface.
When I look at this revolution that's coming with AI and robotics, and you can even see it earlier on with self-driving cars, we have this entire global infrastructure that is built for humans. I remember wondering a while back, why are so many of the robots that are being built humanoid robots? Is that just some weird sci-fi thing? And then I realized, no, it is the correct form factor for a world that's been built for humanoids. And similarly, we've got an internet that was built for human operators. It has browsers, right?
You're listening to the Startup Podcast. This is a Reacts episode. Industry insiders having frank debates about the latest tech, politics, and business news. Whether you're a founder, investor, or operator in a startup, you'll gain insights into how current events connect to broader themes and trends that impact your startup, your investments, and your day-to-day operational decisions. The conversation starts now.
Hey, I'm Chris Saad.
And I'm Yaniv Bernstein.
And on today's show, we're going to talk about deep research from OpenAI and their new operator mode. How is it a direct response to DeepSeek and the new narrative that maybe we don't need so many GPUs to build AI? We're also going to talk about Sam Altman's observations on his personal blog, which is also, we think, a response to the new narrative around DeepSeek. And we're going to talk about Elon Musk trying to troll poor old Sam and OpenAI with his bid to buy the company. And then finally, we're going to talk about JD Vance and his speech over at the AI Summit in France this week. And we're going to muse a little bit about how the new Trump administration and their policies might be more ethical and more immigrant friendly than you might believe. I don't know. We'll have to debate that. Call that and much, much more coming up on this week's show right after the break. Stay tuned.
Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. And it gets even better. Just for TSP listeners, you can get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off. Now, just before we jump in, I've got to remind you all about the Startup Podcast Pact. This podcast is free, and we'd love to keep it that way. And the best way that you can support us is by making sure that you feed the algorithm gods and help us find a bigger audience. Please like, follow, subscribe, and review our podcast in your favorite listening app and on YouTube, and give us a shout out on LinkedIn or wherever it is that you have your founder audience. Thanks so much. Now on with the show.
All right. For our first topic, we wanted to talk about deep research from OpenAI. It's a mode you can toggle your ChatGPT into if you're on ChatGPT Pro and paying $200 a month. It's pretty extraordinary. You basically ask it to do something for you, like, hey, I'd like to understand the market dynamics for shoes in the United States. And it will go off in some cases for 10, 15 minutes at a time. It'll go deep across the web. It'll search, it'll analyze, it'll compile, and it will create PhD level research papers on the topic that you gave it. And perhaps also interesting is that it'll actually ask follow-up questions first. So I think one of the things that ChatGPT is not very good at is, or LLMs in general, is sort of asking clarifying questions. So you ask it for a big task, it'll ask you some clarifying questions, and it will go and think and think and think and really come back with an exhaustive answer. One other bit of context on this, Yaniv, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about it. When it was announced, in the same sentence, in the same breath, in the same tweet, it felt like, to me at least, that Altman went out of his way to mention this is just an example of how the world is going to need more compute than ever. and it seemed like almost a response to the DeepSeek narrative of like, oh my God, we don't need any more GPUs. And this was like, here's an example of just a taste of how deep this reasoning can go. And there's a lot more to come.
Well, Chris, thanks for spending $200 a month on ChatGPT Pro so the rest of us don't have to. But yeah, I think this is a really interesting announcement. Google Gemini have also had a deep research mode for a couple of months on their Gemini Pro subscription, which I do have. It is a lot cheaper than $200. And I tried it a couple of times and I was not particularly impressed. So when OpenAI announced this deep research mode, I was like, oh, well, it's probably going to be one of those nice in theory, but not quite good enough tools. Now, everything I've heard, including Chris, you shared a research report from it to me earlier today. It is much better than the Gemini one. And it's the first thing I've seen that makes me think, well, maybe, just maybe, spending $200 a month on this thing is worthwhile. I've also seen a really positive reaction across the internets from people who actually are serious about this stuff and not just hype followers. I think one person I read, they said it's like having a junior analyst available 24/7. So, in a lot of roles where you have a junior analyst or a junior researcher and you basically say, hey, look, I want to know a whole bunch of stuff about this narrow topic. Go find it for me. And they'll come back 24 hours later or whatever with like a brief. That's what deep research does, except it does it in 10, 15 minutes, or maybe even less. I think it depends. And it does it. I think it can get up to 100 deep research reports per month for $200. So you're getting them for $2 each. And so if the quality is comparable, and if this is a need that you have, suddenly that $200 seems pretty good. And yeah, it's pretty incredible. It's pretty accurate. And so it's a really genuinely useful tool. Now, you mentioned DeepSeek and compute. I think there's a couple of things here. So you're tying it to DeepSeek. And I would say, Chris, in the general sense that, yes, competition is good. This is how I became a capitalist, by the way, a reluctant capitalist. I used to be a total bleeding heart socialist. I'm like, oh, competition leads to good outcomes. And this is just an example of DeepSeek coming in and OpenAI feeling their lead narrow, losing some control of the narrative and thinking, okay, we're going to have to try harder. We're going to push our releases forward instead of dripping them out on our own pace for our own needs. We need to compete hard. And so that's what they've done. Amazing. And then to your point about Sam and talking about the need for more compute, I think the sort of insiders have been saying for a while that the real game is in inference. Inference meaning not the training phase of a model, but the phase where you're actually using it. When it's having those conversations with you, that's called inference. The more powerful, the more capable models become, the more people get used to using them, the more they get woven into various applications and so on, the more and more and more and more inference is going to happen. I mean, you can think about what happened to basic compute, right? You talk about Moore's law. The more megahertz, the more flops we have, the more we use, right? It's not like you get a chip in your phone now that is 1,000 times more powerful than the 486s that I grew up using. It's not like, oh, I don't need all of this compute. No, you get more and more and more compute. You find new things to do with it. And I think absolutely, I was very confused about some of that response to DeepSeek, thinking that, some commentary saying this was bad for AI. Sure, there might be some losers, but this is amazing for AI. The cheaper it gets, the more it'll be used. And there's this thing called Jevons paradox. I mentioned it last time. It's very funny because if you do a Google trend search for it, it just completely spiked after this DeepSeek announcement. And basically, Jevons paradox is this idea in economics that simply says when a resource becomes cheaper, often what happens is the total amount of money spent on it goes up. And the reason for that is when it gets cheaper, people find more uses for it. And I think given that Google trend spike, that's exactly what's going to happen with AI. The cheaper it gets, the more it will get used, the bigger a part of our economy it will become. It will end up everywhere. And so, yes, I think from a compute point of view, inference is capable of mopping up as much compute as you can throw at it.
This is in the same category as operator as well, right? It's not just deep research, meaning it's going deep into the web, following all the links, following all the PDFs and so on. It's also deep reasoning, right? Like it's spending a lot of time thinking through the answer, composing the answer, rewriting the answer, formatting the answer, a la O1. And when you look at both the deep research mode and you look at operator, and if you guys aren't familiar with operator, it's yet another announcement OpenAI made where it's literally going to go browse the web for you and take actions on your behalf. And that's just like crap tons of tokens, right? Just tokens everywhere. It's like analyzing images, moving mice, browsing, typing, you name it. And you combine deep research, the feature, which again is not just doing research, but it's doing reasoning as well. And you combine that with operator, and you combine that with ChatGPT tasks. You can see how you're now starting to coalesce. You have all the building blocks for agents. right? You have recurring actions, long-lived recurring actions, where you can manage and maintain their state and see what state they're at. You have deep investigation, research, deep reasoning, controlling the browser, clicking and acting. It stops and asks you for follow-ups. Like today, I asked it to do something on LinkedIn for me. It asked me to log in for it. It's fucking amazing. And then what it also has, which is an underrated thing, is it has notifications, right? It says, hey, human, please come back. I need help. Or hey, please come back. I've done this for you. And so if you're a product manager, you can literally see the roadmap of thin iterations, thin building blocks that are coalescing into OpenAI agents. It's not even a matter of reading the tea leaves, right? It's like this is as plain as the nose on your face if you know anything about software development, product management, thin slices, iterations, and so on.
Maybe as an aside, friend of the pod, Amir Shavat, who was actually on Reacts just last week, he made a post on LinkedIn that I disagreed with. And so now I get to disagree with him and he doesn't get the right of reply. Sorry, Amir. But he said he tried Operator and it felt really weird and wrong to him. But the interface that these agents are using is the browser. Surely it should be APIs. I said, I disagree. And the reason for that is because the browser is the interface that humans use. And when I look at this revolution that's coming with AI and robotics, and you can even see it earlier on with self-driving cars, we have this entire global infrastructure that is built for humans. And actually what AI is capable of doing is using that infrastructure that's built for humans, but doing it at a large scale and doing it in an automated way. It's the same reason, I remember wondering a while back, why are so many of the robots that are being built humanoid robots? Is that just some weird sci-fi thing? And then I realized, no, the world is built for humanoids. So humanoid is a great form factor, not if you were designing it in a clean room from the ground up, but it is the correct form factor for a world that's been built for humanoids. And similarly, we've got an internet that was built for human operators. It has browsers, right? And so, of course, the best way to hook into that is to use a browser. And I think, in my response to Amir, I said, I think that the future AI agents are going to spend a lot of their time using browsers and communicating to each other in English, right? Like English is a terrible language for computers to talk to each other in, but that is the language that they will use.
Yeah, I mean, it's the revelation of large language models is that they've hacked the human interface called English or called, language, right? In many cases, not all, but in many cases, LLMs are doing what computers could always do. The distinction, the difference is that they're doing it with natural language programming and communicating in natural language back. And so, yes, as you rightly pointed out, Yaniv, whether it is a large language model in a text box or a humanoid robot in the real world, the revelation here, amongst many, is that they are able to fit to the human world, to control human control surfaces. And, I love Amir. I love Amir's background because I share the same background. He was head of platform for Twitter. I was head of platform for the Uber developer platform. We both embrace and love open standards, data portability. He and I are brothers from another mother. But I think it's a mistake of looking at everything like a nail when you have a hammer, right? It's not an API future. It's a UI UX future. Now, does that mean there isn't some metadata in the top of every page that says, hey, here is the conversational endpoint for your LLM agent, whatever? Sure, there will be some, superhighway agent layer that maybe the agent can drop into. But even that will have a disadvantage because the human can't intervene as easily. And so it's not clear to me that actually that's a full advantage. But look, guys, I'm excited. I'm just thrilled by what OpenAI has announced so far. And I'm even more thrilled by connecting the dots and seeing our near-term agent future. I think it's just really, really exciting. Now, there is one thing, maybe a slight criticism, and it was going to be a topic for later in the show, but I think it segues nicely here, which is ChatGPT as an interface still asks you to choose your model and choose your mode. And there's a lot of toggles and dials and mode selectors, and you turn on deep research and all this sort of stuff. And there's a lot of UX for what is ostensibly an intuitive, senior employee, as Sam Altman has described it. So I imagine in the not too distant future, the mainstream version of ChatGPT And I'm not talking about a developer mode, a test mode, an advanced mode, but the mainstream interface. Certainly for a Siri, for a Gemini, for Copilots, and probably also for ChatGPT, is to be de-emphasizing or obfuscating that all of those toggles and dials. Especially the one where you go like, choose the model. Like there should be some kind of routing system on top, some kind of arbitrage, some kind of decision layer. You just ask it something and it decides, hey, given this context, I probably should reason a little deeper, reason a little longer. I'm probably going to need a browser. I'm probably going to need to do this. I'm going to probably need to do that. And it uses the right constellation of models. You see this a little bit with Canvas mode, where if you say, hey, I want to co-author a document with you or whatever, it'll automatically launch Canvas mode. And there's also a toggle to manually toggle it. But I think this will become more true, not less, especially around model selection. And so I'm curious when and how fast the OpenAI team is gonna make that happen.
Totally agree. This topic keeps coming up on our show in slightly different guises, and I must admit, I suffer from what must be a very modern malady, which is model selection anxiety. So I agree with you, Chris. And, while this will help, the issue is still, should I use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini? And I think, an important and valuable skill that professionals are going to need to get is how to perform a good model evaluation and perform model selection. But I think it's worth acknowledging, to your point, that model selection is actually a cognitively challenging thing to do. People suffer from decision fatigue already. The last thing I want to do is worry that I'm using the wrong model for my task, and it's not easy to make that choice. So yes, please, somebody else do it for me. Figure out what model I should use. That would be an absolute win. So I think that's a great observation.
All right, let's talk about topic number 2. Sam Altman posted on his personal blog here his 3 key observations about the economics of AI are, number 1, the intelligence of an AI model roughly equals the log of the resources used to train and run it. These resources are chiefly training compute, data, and inference compute, he says. And again, I think this is somewhat in response to, related to the DeepSeek conversation. I feel like there's been a few glancing comments in that direction. The second point he's made, the second observation he's made, is that the cost to use a given level of AI falls about 10x every 12 months, and lower prices lead to much more usage. Again, I think this is an observation around DeepSeek and quieting that narrative. He likens it to Moore's law. And number 3, the socioeconomic value of linearly increasing intelligence is super exponential in nature. A consequence of this is that we will see no reason for exponentially increasing investment to stop in the near future. Again, I think all 3 of these are really in response, sort of subtweeting the DeepSeek conversation, which is to say, guys, we're going to need a lot of resources to train and run this stuff. Yes, the cost decreases. It decreases about 10x every 12 months. That's okay, but it leads to more usage. And finally, this is a super exponential curve, and there's no reason to stop investing in the near future. So I thought these were super interesting observations in a vacuum. And now kind of reading it again, I think it's a super interesting, if you kind of read between the lines, it's super interesting that he felt the need to clarify the economics of AI, GPUs, compute investment in a post DeepSeek conversation. I think those things are related, tightly related.
So I think it's just a bit of nerd talk that's worth unpacking in Sam's observations, which are nearly deliberately obscure. So first of all, he says that the intelligence gained is logarithmic in the amount of resources expended in training. Now, for the rest of us, what that actually is saying is that the amount of resources required to train goes up exponentially. So that was deliberately obscure, right? So, the logarithm and the exponential are opposites of each other. So yes, goes up exponentially. That means it's a very rapid growth in the cost of training more intelligent models. Okay, great. But then he says, I'll skip to observation 3 because I think 1 and 3 are really the big ones. Then he says the value of a linear increase in intelligence grows super exponentially, meaning, okay, so if doubling the intelligence costs us 100 times more compute, well, the value of an intelligence that is twice as smart is more than 100 times higher. I mean, super exponential is a bit of a silly term, but it's like, I would actually say what he means is growing exponentially, but even faster than the cost of compute. And so what he's saying is, even though normally when the cost of something goes up exponentially, you stop doing it after a while because the cost just gets so ridiculous that it's not worth doing. And he's saying, but in the case of intelligence, the value of the intelligence is so high, and the value of incrementally increasing the intelligence is so high that it is worth eating those exponential cost increases. And yes, I think you're right. There's definitely a subtweet at DeepSeek there. And it's like, even if the coefficient goes down by 10x, right? So it's like everything gets 10 times cheaper. The point is that's a constant time or a linear decrease, but it's an exponential increase in the cost per intelligence. So it gets swallowed up anyway. So sure, DeepSeek's cheaper, but to get another 10 IQ points on this thing will still be probably 10 times more expensive than what it costs to do the current thing.
Yeah, and again, let's also continue to decoder ring this thing. What he's saying is the billions and billions of dollars we've already committed and the billions and billions of dollars we're still raising and will deploy are not only necessary, they will pay massive dividends, right? That's what he's saying. And he's saying that you really can't put a price tag.
That's all he's saying. It's a fancy nerd way of saying
everything's okay. Please keep giving me money. But what he's also saying, and I don't think it's a debatable point, right? Which is the creation of a massive super intelligence is like as close to priceless as you can possibly fucking imagine. Other than perhaps free, abundant energy, the only other thing that could be, as priceless would be free, abundant super intelligence. And so, assuming, putting any skepticism aside, that LLMs or something adjacent to them or something born from them is putting us on a pathway to nearly free, abundant super intelligence for everybody, I don't know how it's possible to argue with the economic equation of like, put all the money in, put it all in now, and win the race at all costs.
It's a compelling argument, Chris. It's also an extremely self-serving one, which is, where Sam is clever. What cost, to your point, Chris, is worth paying for infinite superintelligence? In a sense, an infinite cost is worth paying. What a great argument to make when you're out raising capital. It's ballsy. It's a ballsy argument to make, but, not one without some validity. The question is, can OpenAI pull it off? So far, they've been doing a pretty good job.
There is this really interesting uncanny valley horizon where it's like, this is fucking amazing. And when you use it, you're like, oh, it's letting me down painfully here, here, and here. But it's like the next version is like, oh my, totally amazing. And then after, a couple of weeks, you're like, oh, actually it's letting me down here, here, and here. And I'm always reminded of, there's this really great joke. I'm going to butcher the hell out of it, but with Louis C.K. and he's talking about how quickly we acclimate to things. And he's saying, I remember the first time I sat down in a plane and I had Wi-Fi on the plane, and I was like, this is goddamn amazing. And then the Wi-Fi cuts out halfway through the flight, and everybody's like, oh, this is fucking bullshit. And like, they didn't even know it existed 20 minutes earlier. And he's saying, you're flying in a seat, in a tin can, 30,000 feet above the ground. Everybody should be holding on, screaming, like it's miraculous. And that's really how it is. It's like we just get so acclimated so quickly. I think they're well on their way to fulfilling the dream. So it's exciting to see where it goes.
Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Dovetail, Flow Health, and Quora all use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Why aren't you? Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.
This is basically the OpenAI show at this point, but we promise we will be switching to other topics soon. But the next story I want to talk about is Elon making, I don't know, is it a serious bid? Is it a snarky bid? Is it a sabotaging bid to buy OpenAI? Let's talk about this a little bit. It's I'm reading here from Axios. Elon Musk has offered to buy the operating assets of OpenAI for $97.4 billion in a move that could turn the burgeoning AI industry on its head. What's interesting is there's an argument to be made here that is not actually trying to buy it, but rather OpenAI is currently going through a process of valuing the commercial entity in order to do this B Corp flip up. And so by making an offer, he is setting the price at a certain amount, which will make it hard for the machinations to play out in this B Corp transformation. And so the cynic would say he's trying to, poke them with a stick and make it hard for them to do what they're doing. Maybe the optimist or the Elon fanboy might say, yeah, hell yeah, we want Elon to own OpenAI because we're little pansies who just like anything Elon does. So what do you make of this, Yaniv? Do you think it's a serious bid? Do you think it's a Twitter-style bid where he ends up being the dog that caught the car? Or is it, just a distraction and troll because he's a troll?
I'm so sick of talking about this clown. Yeah, it's a troll thing. He has real beef with Sam Altman, and he's like, how can I make Sam's life harder? And that's what he's trying to do. Like you said, there is some strategy to saying, well, if you want to make Sam's life harder, this is not a bad way to go about it. But I'm exhausted by Elon Musk. I'm exhausted by his fan boys and girls and non-binary people because they exist, Elon, and some of them even like you. I don't know why. Okay, I am sick of all of this crap.
Not his child. His child does not like him.
My goodness. Yeah. And this is the most dangerous man on earth. He has naturally fascist tendencies and he has no idea of anything to do with boundaries. Like, this guy is in the government, in all the government systems. He's tearing down regulation. He's tearing down enforcement agencies. At the same time, he's making these business moves. He's got in trouble with the SEC before for making non-serious offers. Apparently, at the time of recording, OpenAI said they have not received a formal offer. So all we've got right now is a tweet. And, honestly, I'm just sick of giving this guy airtime, so I'm going to stop talking.
My favorite response to this was Sam Altman. He was asked about this just today, I think. And he said, I'm not the one that tweeted out, I've secured the funding to take Tesla private.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's...
and sorry, that was in response to Elon saying that, that OpenAI and SoftBank don't have the money for their $500 billion Starlink project. But he's trying to poke us in the eye, and that's just Elon being Elon. I think it's a distraction. But yeah, as you said, it continues to be petulant, childish behavior from someone who's just incredibly powerful and important, and it should concern everybody. All right, let's get off OpenAI, let's get off Elon, but let's stay on the Trump administration. And actually, I want to talk positively about them for a second. So JD Vance just gave a speech at the AI Action Summit in France, where he basically walked through some version of the following narrative. AI is transformational and critically important. The US is and will continue to dominate all AI everywhere. That does not mean there isn't a seat at the table for everybody else. We want to partner with you. In order for AI to flourish, we need to stop talking about risks and start talking about opportunities and upside. Any country or party or global alliance that tries to limit AI's growth and success because of fear and risk mitigation is shooting ourselves in the foot. So deregulate, accelerate, and partner with us on having the West win the day. I posted on Facebook about this today where I sort of said, the Trump administration, it's hard to understand the real signal from the noise, the good intentions from the fascist power grabs, and the real out-of-the-box geopolitical thinking from the ethnic cleansing. There are some things, some of the time, from some of the people that sounds like a good idea to me, and some of it is just fascist bullying and power grabs. I think this particular speech was great. He was literally quoting key Silicon Valley phrases around if you're not paying for the product, then you're the product, and bits versus atoms, and this idea of being techno-optimist, really, and betting on the future versus the fear and uncertainty and doubt that has crept into into tech journalism and into culture in general about technology and about growth. As far as being a representative for Silicon Valley interests, ideologies, growth, and techno-optimism, I think that was the most educated and well-represented, forceful argument for those values on the global stage that Silicon Valley could hope for. But on the other hand, someone in my comments described it as a Faustian bargain that Silicon Valley has made with these people, and I don't necessarily disagree with that either. So, but anyway, we want to call balls and strikes, as Jason Calacanis says. His ass is real sore from the fence sitting. And I think in this case, he's
not sitting on the fence anymore. His ass is really sore from bending over, Chris.
But yeah, I think that particular talk I think that particular talk was a good one, even though it comes from,
Yeah.
there's a lot of hypocrisy and kind of, they don't have a moral high ground, but at least what the words that he said were pretty good.
Well, Chris, you know that I like to bring Nazis into the conversation when the current American regime comes into it. And the way I would like to bring them into this conversation, not everything the Nazis did was bad. Okay?
We're going to put that on the swag. We're going to put that on the swag.
They founded Volkswagen.
Go to our swag store.
It's true. It's a great way for me to get taken out of context. But yes, I will say it again. Not everything the Nazis did were bad. They founded Volkswagen, a great car brand. They built a network of autobahns that's in use to this day. They banned smoking in public places. There are other things they did that were enlightened policy. But it doesn't matter because they were fucking Nazis, right? And when you zoom out and look at the broader context, it doesn't matter that they did a few things right, because in the broader context of what they did, it is drowned by that. They had no credibility as governing in the general interest of their people or the world. And I would say the same about this speech. Yes, you view it in isolation, not a bad speech. But this is a vice president who is part of a regime that is busy tearing up all geopolitical rules, bullying its allies, bullying the weak and vulnerable, tearing down institutions and democratic norms. And he comes to Europe and lectures the Europeans about what they should and shouldn't be doing. It makes me feel sick. Like, I don't want to listen to this guy. I don't really care what he has to say. He has shown himself to be craven and dangerous and lacking all credibility. So, again, like Elon, don't care. I wish he just goes into a hole and I never hear about him again. The end.
You know, I agree with you, of course, that the trump card, if you will, the overriding factor in all of this, whether their policies are good or bad, is that is like 2 or 3 statements. Like, I'm looking for 11,000 more votes. You know, immigrants are the poisoning the blood of the country. The media is the enemy of the people. Oh, look, there's an insurrection. I guess I'll watch it on TV. These things are disqualifying actions and statements. I remember somebody said to me recently, well, you know, if you're really thirsty and, you know, you only have 2 drinks to choose from, you know, you got to pick one, right? And you know, Kamala was a crappy drink. And I was like, no, that's not actually the analogy. The analogy is, imagine you're really thirsty and you got to choose one drink to pour in the cup. One is a crappy drink and the other is smashing the cup on the floor. And so, like, there's really no comparison. And there's this guy is breaking the cup, and this one was like a lukewarm, you know, Chardonnay. So pick your poison and move on.
And lest I be accused of not being able to say anything positive about the Trump regime, speaking of drinks, I am actually in favor of the reversal of the plastic straw ban. So well done, Donald Trump. That was environmentalist virtue signaling that didn't really save the planet and made everyone's drinking experience worse. So yeah, but everything you say, I agree with.
Now, related to this is a little bit of an amusing corner that we wanted to jump into for our last topic, and it's actually related to this. So this is more, I would say, ambiguous commentary on the Trump administration instead of pure hate. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that the global world order was, you know, at best idealistic hypocrisy or showmanship, and really America was in charge, and it's really a game of those who are powerful are in power, are in charge. One thing you could say about that is, hey, at least they've diminished or removed the hypocrisy and the shell game, and they revealed the emperor to have no clothes. That's one possible upside. I happen to think that aiming for an ideal of a rules-based global system is better than raw power exercised without restraint. Another thing you might say is, hey, all of these undocumented immigrants are in the United States and are being treated like a second class of people. It's a sort of type of slave labor. And actually, Steve, what's his face, one of the real creepy Trump advisors, was on CNN saying...
Bannon?
Not Bannon, the other guy, is the skinny, weedy guy.
Oh, Miller.
Stephen Miller, thank you. Jay Tapper was saying, well, these people are picking fruits and powering the economy, you know, surely this is going to drive inflation. And Miller is like, surely you're not advocating for a permanent underclass, basically a slave class to do our bidding in this country, are you, Jake? And I was like, wow, you can't argue with that. There is a permanent underclass of undocumented immigrants that are been taken advantage of. And you could argue that expelling them, or at least not factoring in their economic value is the right way to think about that. Put aside the humanity, their livelihoods, whatever. I'm just saying there has been an economic argument for these people to exist that is actually an argument for a form of economic slavery. And I think that's interesting. But here's what I actually wanted to talk about. If you think about the near future, where there is this kind of accrual of value to the top, right? Especially with AI, the Magnificent Seven are going to get a lot of the economic value of AI. The country with the Magnificent Seven in it is going to get a lot of the value of AI. And so America is going to race ahead as a world leader. The Magnificent Seven are going to race ahead as the global corporate leaders. That suggests that you want kind of to have all of the resources onshore. You want to be kind of a full stack disruptor. And so you want to centralize, and so it makes sense you want to centralize manufacturing, relocate manufacturing back to the US. You want to get your hands maybe on Canada or Greenland. It makes sense that you want to bring all these things back on shore. And what also makes sense is if you have automation in these brand new factories, right? These are modern factories. You don't need the permanent underclass. You don't need the low-cost labor. And so from their point of view, and please, dear listener, don't get me wrong, don't misunderstand my meaning. If you are this kind of people where you want fewer brown people in your country, you're worried about the culture, and you are worried about capital, value creation towards capital, then it makes sense in your worldview to kick out all the brown people, move manufacturing onshore, get all the power, the resources locally, and automate your way to manufacturing and production heaven. And so there is this kind of bizarre, racist, geopolitical, AI forward, technology forward strategy that actually sort of hangs together if you have a combination of these beliefs all swirling around in your head. And so I just thought that was an interesting thing that I don't think is quite getting connected in other conversations.
I mean, first of all, it's a relatively evil philosophy, but okay. And again,
Yep.
to my previous point, the crocodile tears of a Trump apparatchik worried about an underclass and therefore doing them a favor by deporting them, like, come on. That's nonsense. There is no compassion there. But what I would say is, let's imagine, okay, this is the strategy. It's not a very humane one, but it makes sense. It has an internal consistency, I think is what you're trying to say, Chris. I would still say they're doing it in the wrong order, right?
Yeah, they do all the shit in the wrong order. It's like Trump kicked off the influencers and then instituted the blue badge. But let me continue to be the devil's advocate, and please, guys who are listening, don't confuse my devil advocacy with my beliefs. They could argue the permanent underclass, slave class, economic slave class, that's unethical, immoral, and wrong. And pulling away American resources from American citizens, that's unethical, and that we should protect America for Americans. Now, this doesn't have any empathy. It doesn't recognize the value of immigrants. It doesn't talk about, the economic engine and contributions of those immigrants, on and on and on. But from their two-dimensional chess point of view, it's actually unethical to have a permanent economic slave class and to not be able to serve the needs of the American poor in favor of these other people.
Yeah, but it's bullshit. I guess my point is it's bullshit. It's a bullshit argument because the solution to that argument is not to deport those people. It is to make them into citizens. So anyway, if you were to follow that argument, you're doing it in the wrong order, because you would embrace the automation first. As you were saying, like, what this is likely to do is drive a lot of inflation alongside the human misery. So it's like, what are you really benefiting other than furthering a populist and nativist, arguably racist goal?
Yeah, well, again, the Steve Miller's argument was only 1% of immigrants are working in kind of picking corn and whatever, and so it's actually the inflationary impact is minimal to nothing.
Bollocks. That's just bollocks.
What I'm trying to do, Yaniv, is I'm trying to understand some logical worldview that stops me from becoming this reactionary kind of bleeding heart liberal, and helps me understand, like, where is the kernel of truth here? But I do think, and now I'm talking for my actual self, I do think ultimately this is the Republican agenda writ large that started long before Trump and will live long beyond Trump, which is to prioritize capital, to prioritize concentration and redistribution of wealth to the top, and to remove government from getting in the way.
I don't agree with that, Chris, because I think the reason that there are so many illegal immigrants in the US, no other country has home to such a high proportion of illegal immigrants, is that actually, if you care mostly about the well-being of the wealthy, then having an underpaid underclass of fearful indentured workers is fantastic for you, right? Like every time, in the past, there have been all these scandals, all of these Republicans who rail against illegal immigrants. It turns out that they employ illegal immigrants, that their housemate is an illegal immigrant. Why? Because they work hard and they don't complain and they don't get paid much. Fantastic. So it's utter hypocrisy.
I agree with you. That's been the double secret little game that all of these politicians are playing. I guess the main insight that I'm trying to make now is the equation shifts when you start transitioning to an AI economy.
Sure.
When you have automated factories and then you have automated farming and you have automated even like at-home help, there is this kind of weird transition period where actually, again, from their point of view, we get to have fewer brown people, but yet all of the conveniences that capital affords us through automation. I don't know if that's what's in their head. I just thought it was interesting that there is this transition period happening between labor being replaced with robots and labor being kicked out of the country, even while they're trying to reindustrialize the country at the same time. So there's a
honestly,
intersection point there.
Honestly, at this point, I think the best mental model I've come up with is that these are like cartoon villains. I think trying to find method in the madness is a form of madness itself. I understand what you're getting at, but
everyone is the hero of their own story. I think we have to figure out what their story is and where the heroism is in their story in order to be, as founders, investors, operators, commentators, to try to be predictive of their behavior.
The story is winning. And in Elon Musk's case, a combination of winning and trolling. Like a lot of this stuff is like, isn't it funny that we can say this thing and then we do it? Like, remember, Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, like the name is a joke, is like literally a joke.
Yeah, I think the narrative is power,
which is a cartoon villain narrative.
I think they've convinced themselves that absolute power protects them and theirs. So if we are here to serve Americans, then we're going to put America first. And the best way to serve Americans is by making sure we're in charge of America and that we're not giving condoms to Kenya, because as long as America is all powerful, we don't need to go via the rules-based system. And so we want to concentrate power in America, and we want to concentrate the governance of America in the few that believe in our kind of power. And we want to concentrate wealth and value creation in the few companies that we're invested in and that we control.
The good news is that political scientists have a name for that worldview, which is fascism.
Fascism.
Yay.
Yay. And on that somber note, we always end it on a happy note, don't we, Yaniv?
Don't we just?
All right, guys, on that note,
go sing a song, sniff some roses, hug your children, look up at the sky, and just observe the miracle of life. That is how we'd like to leave you all.
Anyway.
And Chris, if that's not enough for everybody, and after looking at the sky, they're like, I want to learn more about Chris and what he's up to and all of his amazing thoughts, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn and all the social media at Chris Saad, or on my newsletter, chrissaad.com/newsletter. How about you, Yaniv?
That was a fucking baller segue, you've got to admit. So, yep, I'm mostly on LinkedIn, trying to make it a less boring place, trying mostly unsuccessfully not to feed the trolls. So, yep, I love connection requests from TSP listeners. A few have come through in the last week. I've accepted them all. So, yeah, please keep them coming and love to be connected.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us as always. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye. Today's episode of the Startup Podcast was brought to you by Vanta. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies already use Vanta. Why don't you? Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.